What if I told you that in thousands of public high schools across America, the Pentagon is running the show in some classrooms? It's true. It's a massive system with a really long history, and today we're going to pull back the curtain and see exactly how it works.
And that number right there, 500,000. That's how many teenagers, some as young as 14, are right now enrolled in these military-run programs. It is a huge, huge presence in American education, and you gotta wonder, what's really going on here?
So here's our game plan. First, we'll break down what this program actually is. Then we'll look at the official story versus what's happening on the ground, who's signing up and why. From there, we dive into the huge debate about military recruiting, hear from two students caught in the middle of it all, and wrap up by looking at how the entire nation is divided on this.
All right, so let's get right to it. The program at the heart of all this is called the Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps. You probably heard it called JROTC. And believe me, it's been around for a very long time.
Yeah, this thing was established way back in 1916. Today, it's in over 3,000 high schools. And think about this. It's basically a daily class. A lot of times it even replaces gym class. But it's not taught by your typical teacher. Nope. It's run by retired soldiers, and the whole thing is paid for by the Department of Defense.
So, you might be asking, why? What's the point of having this in a high school? Well, if you ask the Pentagon or school officials, the purpose isn't what you'd probably guess. Officially, this is not a recruitment program. The people who run it say it's all about making better citizens. They say the mission is to teach kids about service, about discipline, and about self-improvement, not to get them to sign on the dotted line.
And in some cities, like Chicago, this idea gets even sharper. The authorities there pitch JROTC as an anti-gang. A way to give kids in tough neighborhoods a sense of structure, of belonging, a positive alternative to life on the streets.
But when you start to peel back the layers and look at where these programs are and who is signing up, well, that's when a much more complicated picture starts to emerge. For a lot of school districts that are just struggling to make ends meet, the appeal is dead simple. The program costs them nothing. The Pentagon foots the bill for the instructors. As one principal put it, they're free teachers. For a school with no cash, that's almost impossible to turn down.
Now, just look at these numbers from Chicago. It's really striking. Over 90% of the JROTC cadets there are either Latino or African American. Only 5% are white. And this isn't just a Chicago thing. This points to a trend happening all over the country.
And that trend isn't just about demographics, it's about geography. The programs are packed into downtown urban centers, the Rust Belt, and all across the South, especially in a state like Texas. And what do these places often have in common? Fewer economic opportunities for young people.
Which, of course, brings us to the elephant in the room. The big question at the center of this whole debate. Is JROTC, despite all the official denials, actually a recruitment pipeline for the U.S. military? The instructors themselves are adamant about this. They say their job is to be mentors, period. If a student asks about joining up, sure, they might give them a business card for a recruiter, but they swear that's where it stops.
But then you hear from an actual Army recruiter, and the story flips completely. They call JROTC their biggest asset. Why? Because it helps them find exactly the kids they're looking for. It's a flat-out contradiction to the official line.
And get this isn't just some kind of informal relationship. There is a federal law that actually forces public high schools to give the Pentagon contact information for all their students. That gives military recruiters a direct phone line to teenagers, whether they're in JROTC or not. So here's the bottom line. Forget intent for a second and just look at the outcome. The result is crystal clear, 40%. 40% of JROTC kids go on to enlist in the armed forces after high school. That number? Well, it speaks for itself.
But behind all these numbers and political debates, there are real kids making choices that will shape the rest of their lives. So let's zoom in on the stories of two of them, Yasmin and Saul.
Yasmin, she was a rock star cadet. Her dream was to be a lawyer. The Army saw her talent and offered her a full-ride scholarship, but she turned it down. She chose a harder road, through technical college, to hold on to her own dream. And then there's Saul. His dream? To drive a tank. He enlisted before he even had his diploma, but when it was time to ship out for training, he just vanished. To this day, nobody, not his family, not his instructors, knows what happened to him. Two students, two completely different fates.
And here you can just feel the impossible situation for parents. Yasmin's mom admits she was scared of her daughter joining the Army, but at the same time she felt like she had to support whatever her daughter chose.
It just shows the incredible weight these decisions put on the entire family.
Now, as you can probably guess, having military programs in public schools hasn't gone unchallenged. There's actually a growing movement of veterans, parents, and students who are starting to raise some serious questions.
And a lot of this pushback comes from veterans themselves. Guys like Rory Fanning, a former soldier who now calls himself a counter-recruiter. He says that these kids only get the glossy sales pitch, but they never hear about what he calls the darker side, the brutal reality of war, that he thinks every kid deserves to know before they sign up.
And the students, they're starting to find their own voices in this too. Community groups are setting up things like slam poetry nights, giving students a stage to talk about their anxieties and to push back against what many feel is a constant pressure to see the military as their only way out.
So in the end, JROTC is stuck right at this complicated crossroads between opportunity, patriotism, and let's be honest, economics. For some kids, it's a lifeline, a path to discipline and a future they wouldn't have otherwise. But for others, it feels like a predatory system that preys on vulnerable communities. And it forces us all to ask a really tough question. When the best opportunity a school can offer a child comes dressed in a military uniform, what is the real cost?